You walked into the room with a position. You had done the work. You had the number, the argument, the answer. You knew exactly what you were going to say. You had rehearsed it on the drive in. Then the senior person shifted in their chair. No expression, no signal, just stillness. And before a single word was spoken, before anyone pushed back, before anyone said no, you started revising, not the delivery, the position itself. You told yourself that was reading the room. You told yourself that was emotional intelligence. You told yourself that was knowing how things work. But it was not reading the room. It was paying a toll at a gate you did not see, to a person who never asked you to pay it. Your real position was never tested. Your leverage was surrendered before the conversation even started. You left the room with access. You also left it smaller than when you walked in. This is not weakness. This is not insecurity. This is not a character flaw. This is intelligent self-protection. The kind men develop because it works. And somewhere along the way, it became the mechanism someone else uses. They manage you without ever issuing a single command. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how that mechanism works. You will see what it has cost you in money, in access, and in the honest positions you modified before anyone asked. And you will understand what it looks like when a man builds a system where rejection is survivable, where the gate loses its power because he stopped needing it to open. There is a version of this behavior that looks indistinguishable from competence. That is what makes it so expensive. That is what we are going to name. Because the first room is only the visible version. The real mechanism starts before the room reacts. The mechanism has a name. In the moment it operates, it is not called fear of rejection. In the moment it operates, it is called caution. It is called awareness. It is called knowing your audience. But underneath those labels, the structure is the same. You read an uncertain signal, an unreadable expression, a silence that lasted a beat too long, a tone that did not give you what you were looking for. And you adjusted, not after pushback, before it. You ran the calculation in under a second. What behavior is required to keep this relationship warm? And then you delivered that behavior before anyone asked for it. That is not reading the room. That is the approval gate, operating exactly as designed. Social psychologists Roy Baumeister and Mark Leary published research in the 1990s. They identified the need to belong as a fundamental human motivation, not a preference, not a personality trait, but a core drive, as basic as hunger. Their work showed that social exclusion activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. Your brain does not cleanly distinguish between being physically hurt and being socially cut out. Both register as threat. Both demand a response. That wiring kept your ancestors alive. When exclusion from the group meant no food, no shelter, no protection. The man who felt rejection as pain and adjusted his behavior accordingly survived. The man who did not, frequently did not. You inherited that wiring. You also inherited it into a world where the stakes are different. But the alarm system has not been updated. And so, the same mechanism that once protected survival now fires in a salary conversation, in a boardroom, in a group chat, where the wrong opinion could change the temperature of the room within minutes. This is not a personal failure. This is biology operating in the wrong context. But here is what Machiavelli understood that your biology does not account for. A man who needs to be liked is easier to manage than a man who does not. The need for approval is visible. Behavior shaped by that need is predictable, and what is visible and predictable can be used, not necessarily by someone with bad intentions, but by any system, any structure, any relationship where your compliance has value. You do not need to be manipulated. You only need to be readable. Now, watch the mechanism more closely. In the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch ran a series of experiments. They became one of the most replicated findings in social psychology. He showed subjects a line on a card. Then he showed them 3 comparison lines and asked which one matched. The answer was obvious. There was no real ambiguity, but the other people in the room who were working with Asch gave the wrong answer first. Unanimously, confidently, a significant portion of real subjects changed their answer to match the room. Not because they were stupid, not because they were weak, because the pressure of social disagreement, the cost of being the one person publicly out of step, was enough to override what they could see with their own eyes. Think about what that means. Approval pressure does not only change your behavior, it changes what you will say out loud about what you know to be true. The man in the Asch experiment did not lie to protect himself. He genuinely began to doubt his own perception under the weight of social disapproval. The room's certainty became louder than his own. You have been in that room, not with lines on a card, but in a meeting where the senior voice had already spoken, and you had a different read on the numbers. In a conversation where you knew the contract term was wrong, but the relationship felt warm, and a challenge would have cooled it fast. In a discussion where your honest position would have created friction, and the approval of the people around you felt like something you could not afford to lose. In that moment, you adjusted, you added qualifiers, you let the room's direction stand, you told yourself that was being collaborative. But that is not the real trap. The real trap is not that you changed your answer. The trap is what you told yourself afterward, that it was the right call, that the timing was wrong, that you would push back next time. And next time became a pattern. The pattern became the expectation others held of you. The expectation became the thing you maintained without anyone asking you to maintain it. The approval gate does not need a confrontation to close. It does not need a threat. It only needs enough repetitions of your own compliance, until your behavior becomes the architecture that holds it in place. By this point, in most men's lives, the gate is not even operated by someone else. It runs on the memory of how much it cost the last time you did not comply. We have named the behavior, we have named the wiring, but we have not yet named the price. And the price arrives first in a specific form, a number you can calculate, a number with a comma in it. That is where we are going next. If the mechanism operates before rejection arrives, the first place to see it is money. There is a man in a hiring conversation. He has done his research. He knows the market rate for someone with his background, his track record, his skills in this specific market. He has a number. He has prepared for pushback. Then the conversation goes well, better than expected. The hiring manager is warm, enthusiastic, the chemistry is real. By the end of the first hour, the relationship already feels like the kind that lasts. And when the number comes up, when the moment he prepared for finally arrives, he drops it. Not because he was asked to, not because pushback came, because the warmth of the relationship felt like something he could not afford to put at risk. Because a rejection in that moment would have cost more than 15%. He called it strategic. He called it reading the opportunity. It was the approval tax, and he paid it without an invoice. The approval tax is what you surrender in advance of a rejection that has not arrived. It is the automatic discount applied to your own value, your rate, your position, your terms, to prevent the discomfort of a no that might never have come. And, unlike most costs, it does not arrive as a single bill. It arrives quietly, repeatedly, in every negotiation where the relationship felt warmer than the number. Run the math. 15% of a salary, paid across 3 years, of the same role, is not a rounding error. It is a number with a comma in it. It is the cost of a fear that never needed to be paid, to a relationship that would have survived the real number, for access that was never actually contingent on the discount. And salary is only one line on the invoice. The approval tax also appears in the scope of work you expanded without renegotiating, because the client relationship felt important, in the rate you held flat for 2 years, because raising it felt like risking the warmth. In the deal term, you softened, because the other side seemed pleased, and you did not want to change the temperature of the room. Every one of those decisions felt reasonable in the moment. Every one of them was a toll at the same gate. Now, bring this into access. Because money is only one form of the tax, the other form is harder to see and considerably harder to recover once it is gone. Money is the easiest cost to count. Access is harder because it often disappears without ever announcing itself. There is a man in a professional network. He has one person, one well-positioned contact, sitting between him and 3 visible opportunities: a senior figure, a well-connected peer, a client with referral power in a market he is trying to enter. He does not disagree with this person. He does not push back. He shows up when asked. He performs the version of himself that this relationship requires: agreeable, available, aligned. Over time, without a single explicit conversation, his behavior has been shaped entirely by the implied cost of losing access. The gatekeeper never threatened him. There was no ultimatum, no conversation that crossed a line. Just a relationship with temperature. And he learned, by feel, what behavior kept it warm. Robert Greene observed that power rarely operates through commands. It operates by making others feel they cannot afford to lose access. The gatekeeper does not push. They simply make the door feel irreplaceable. And once a man believes a door is irreplaceable, he has already handed over the key. The gatekeeper never needed to lock it. You already decided what you had to do to walk through. This is where control changes hands, not in a confrontation, not in a threat, in a temperature drop. One introduction that quietly did not happen. After he held a position the contact disagreed with. One referral that dried up without explanation. One invitation to the room where decisions are made that simply stopped arriving, not with conflict, not with words, just with absence. He noticed, he adjusted, he did not push back again, and from that point forward, the gate managed itself, because he managed himself on its behalf. The visible cost is not only the opportunities that never came through, it is the leverage he surrendered to maintain the relationship. Every position softened, every disagreement swallowed, every real number not sent. Each one was a concession made to an access point. That should never have held that much weight. One gatekeeper controlling 3 opportunities is not a network. It is a single point of failure, wearing the appearance of a connection. But we have not yet reached the most expensive version of this mechanism, because, so far, the gatekeeper has been external, a real person holding something real. What comes next is the version where the external gatekeeper is gone, and the mechanism keeps running anyway. That is the version that costs the most, and that is exactly where we are going. Access explains why a man protects a relationship. Judgment reveals what he gives up to protect it. There is a scene most men can place exactly, not a salary conversation, not a network meeting, a decision that mattered, a business projection that was wrong, a contract term that was going to cost someone, a strategy the senior voice in the room had already committed to, publicly, confidently, and you had a real reason to question it. You had the data, you had done the work, you had a different read, and the senior voice had already spoken. You looked around the room, you felt the temperature, you calculated, in under a second, what the cost of contradiction would be. Not a direct threat, not a warning, just the sense that disagreement in this moment would cool something that had been warm, and you let the room's direction stand. You added a qualifier, you framed it as a question rather than a position, or you said nothing at all and told yourself the timing was wrong. The room made a worse decision. You were present, you said nothing real. This is not the cost of money. This is not the cost of access. This is something more expensive and harder to recover. The suppression of judgment at the moment it was most needed. Purchased not by a threat, but by the approval gate, operating at full efficiency. Epictetus identified the boundary precisely more than 2,000 years ago. There are things inside your control, your judgment, your position, your choices, and there are things outside your control. The approval of others, the temperature of the room, whether the senior voice accepts your read or dismisses it. The Stoic argument is not that approval is unimportant. It is that operating as if it were inside your control is a guaranteed mechanism for losing what actually is. When you modify your stated judgment to manage someone else's reaction, you have traded something you own, your honest position, for something you cannot buy, their approval in advance, before they have even responded. That is not strategy. That is the gate extracting payment from your most valuable asset. And here is the part that compounds. It is not one meeting, it is the pattern that meeting creates. A man who suppresses his judgment once, under approval pressure, builds a reflex. The reflex becomes the default. Over enough repetitions, he stops noticing the gap between what he sees and what he says. Because the gap has become so familiar, it feels like professionalism. He is not dishonest. He is managed, and he has become, gradually, the most valuable kind of person to have in a room, where compliance without confrontation is needed, present, capable, and reliably silent at the moments that matter most. We have now named 3 costs. The behavior cost, positions surrendered before anyone asked. The money cost, value discounted to protect warmth. The access cost, leverage handed to a single gate. And now the judgment cost, honesty modified to maintain approval. In rooms where honesty was the entire reason for being there, each one is real, each one compounds, each one was paid without a transaction ever being named. But none of them is the version that reveals the full architecture of the trap, because every cost we have named so far had an external source. A room, a hiring manager, a gatekeeper holding something real, a person with real power over something you genuinely needed. The final version has none of that. The final version is the mechanism running on nothing but habit and old fear. In a room where the gatekeeper has no real power over you anymore, where the people whose approval you are still managing stopped influencing your future years ago, where you are paying the approval tax to a system that has long since lost the ability to collect. That is the most expensive version, not because of what it takes from your income or your network, because you built it yourself and you are still maintaining it. The old room is where the mechanism exposes itself most clearly, because there, the gate may no longer be outside him. He has not moved far in distance, maybe a few miles, a different neighborhood, a different zip code, but he has moved in income, in the problems he solves, in the conversations he is capable of having, in the level at which he operates on a Tuesday morning, compared to where he was 3 years ago. He knows this. He can feel it in the work, in the clients who seek him out, in the rooms he has earned the right to be in. Then he goes home, a family gathering, a dinner with the old group, the people who knew him before the move, before the clients, before the rate, before the level, the people whose approval first taught him what approval felt like, the first gate. And something shifts in him before he even walks through the door. He does not mention the new client, does not bring up the new rate, does not let the conversation go anywhere near the thinking he has been doing, the positions he now holds, the version of himself that shows up to work on a Tuesday. He makes himself smaller, readable, familiar. He performs the old version, the one they knew, the one that fit, the one that did not create friction just by existing. At a different altitude, he tells himself he is being humble. He tells himself he is not showing off. He tells himself this is how good men behave, around people who have not had the same opportunities. This is the part we have been building toward. Back at the beginning of this video, we said there is a version of this behavior that looks indistinguishable from competence. This is the version that looks indistinguishable from humility, from loyalty, from gratitude. The costume is different, the mechanism is identical, because humility is an accurate assessment of your position. What he is doing in that room is a performance of smallness, designed to manage the discomfort of people who no longer control anything real in his life. The old circle cannot fire him, cannot close his clients, cannot remove his access to the rooms he has built his way into. The gate they hold opens to a room that stopped funding his future years ago, and he is still paying to walk through it. This is not loyalty. This is not humility. This is not gratitude. This is the approval gate, running on nothing but internalized habit. And it is costing him the identity he has actually earned, in front of the exact people he no longer needs to perform for. The principle here is not new. Every serious student of power has observed some version of it. The man who shaped his behavior for an original group, in order to survive, that group carries the shaping long after the survival stakes have disappeared. The belonging needs of early life: to be accepted, to not be cast out, to remain readable to the people who first held the gate, do not automatically expire when the consequences of rejection do. The wiring runs forward, the stakes do not. You are not the same man who needed that circle's approval to feel safe. That man was rational. That circle fed him, sheltered him, shaped the first version of who he was. The fear of their rejection was grounded in real costs, but those costs have changed. The wiring has not caught up, and so you return to the old room and pay an old tax to an old gate that has no real power left. except the power you carry inside it, intact, preserved. Still running the same calculation, it ran when the stakes were real. That is not humility. That is not loyalty. That is the most expensive version of the trap. Because the gatekeeper is you. The door is inside you. And you have been the one deciding it needs to stay locked. We have now named the mechanism in full. The behavior cost, the money cost, the access cost, the judgment cost, the identity cost, each one paid at the same gate, each one without a transaction ever being named. The question now is not what the mechanism costs. The question is what it looks like when a man stops paying. That is the only part left to show. Once the gatekeeper is internal, the answer cannot be more performance. It has to be architecture. This is what the counter system looks like, not inspiration. Architecture. A man sends the real number. He holds the actual position. He declines the invitation he does not want without performing regret. He does not soften the answer to manage the temperature of a relationship he is not sure he needs. Not because he is indifferent to rejection, because he built the system that makes any single rejection survivable. Multiple access points. No single gatekeeper, holding 3 opportunities simultaneously. No one relationship where warmth is the difference between forward momentum and standing still. He does not perform for any one gate because he already built the next one before he needed it. Some doors closed when he started operating this way. He already knew they would. He priced it in. Before he sends any number, any position, any real answer into a relationship that carries weight, he runs one question first. If this person said no tomorrow or disappeared from his network entirely, what would I actually lose? And what would I have to rebuild? If the answer is too much to risk, that is not a relationship. That is a control point. And control points require counter-architecture, not better performance. That question is not cynical. It is structural. It is what a man asks when he has decided to stop maintaining a gate at the cost of everything that matters. 3 things to take from this video. The first, fear of rejection does not wait for rejection to arrive. It operates in the gap before the answer comes. In that gap, positions are softened, prices are dropped, honest answers are adjusted, and silence is purchased, without a transaction ever being named. The gate does not need a confrontation. It only needs the gap. The second, the approval tax is calculable, the money left in salary negotiations, the access surrendered to a single gatekeeper, the judgment suppressed in rooms where it was most needed, the identity performed for a circle that stopped influencing your future years ago. Each cost has a number. The compound total is larger than most men have allowed themselves to calculate. The third, and this is the one that matters, stop performing for a single gate. Build multiples. Establish access points that do not require ongoing compliance to maintain. Make rejection cheap by making it structurally non-fatal. The man with one gatekeeper and no alternatives cannot afford to push back. The man with 3 access points sends the real number every time, because the cost of one no has already been priced into the architecture before the conversation starts. The man who changed his position before anyone asked. The man who changed his answer when the room leaned the other way. The man who made himself smaller in the old room before anyone told him to. Different rooms, one mechanism, different costs. If you recognized yourself in any of those rooms, name the gate. One word below. Money, access, guilt, approval, fear, or silence. That word is where the tax is being collected. And the gate does not need a lock. When you are already deciding what behavior is required to pass through it,